Today we're going to discuss how Muhammad completely, and I mean completely, disqualifies himself as a true prophet based on his own claims in the Quran. Forget every other argument you think you have for Islam. This one point alone is enough to show that he's a complete fraud. And once you see this, there's literally like no going back. If you've ever wondered whether Muhammad was a true prophet sent by God, you need to stay for this entire video because we're going to put him to the test. All right, so let's get right into it. So if there is a God and he does send us messengers to help guide us, then he's going to give us ways to tell like which ones are the real ones, which ones are the fake ones. But Muhammad makes a claim in the Quran that no true prophet ever would. And once you see how this plays out, it's actually just over. Like it's done. Like he's out. He's done. In this video, I'm going to walk you through a very simple test, a test that shows Muhammad's claim to being a prophet doesn't actually hold up. What's actually really cool about this test is that it doesn't rely on the Bible or on the New Testament or anything else. It's a sort of internal check to see whether or not a prophet is real, and Muhammad fails it miserably. All right, so let's break this down. So if God does send a prophet to guide us, there's a lot of different ways that he could use to make them sort of stand out. Miracles, for example, would definitely help. Or maybe these prophets could predict the future, giving us proof that they're connected to something beyond the natural world. These wouldn't necessarily prove that they're a prophet, but it would definitely help. But there's actually another way that I think is a little bit more reliable. So if God sends a series of prophets, he could have the earlier ones tell us what to expect from the later ones. And that way, when the next prophet shows up, we already have some clues about what to expect. Maybe it's like a name, maybe it's a specific place that they're from, or even certain characteristics that we should be on the lookout for. And of course, not every prophet needs to be foretold. The first prophet, for example, wouldn't have anyone to predict them, but if you are foretold by an earlier prophet, it's definitely something that you'd want to make clear, because I think that would be really, really good evidence. And here's where the problem with Muhammad starts to come in. Just like a con artist could lie and forge a signature, a fake prophet could also lie and say what they were foretold by an earlier prophet when they actually weren't. And so how do we figure out who's actually telling the truth? Well, I've got a very simple 4-question test that will expose anyone who tries to lie about being a prophet. And really, like, shouldn't prophets worth listening to be able to pass a basic test? But before we test out Muhammad, let's actually put this test in action with another guy that I think most of us will be familiar with, and most of us actually consider to be a false prophet, namely Joseph Smith. So let's take a trip back to the early 1800s to a small town in upstate New York. The year is 1830, and a young man named Joseph Smith is claiming something very big, something that would eventually lead to the founding of the Mormon Church. Smith wasn't just saying that he had a message from God. He claimed that his arrival was foretold thousands of years ago by none other than Joseph, the son of Jacob, in the Old Testament. Now imagine that you're hearing this claim back in the 1830s. You'd be fairly, to put it lightly, you'd be probably a little bit intrigued, right? Like, there's a modern day prophet predicted by an ancient biblical figure. Naturally, you'd want to open your Bible and see if this was actually true. So Smith pointed to Genesis 50:33 as the prophecy supposedly foretelling his coming. So you grab a Bible, flip to Genesis 50, and you find nothing. As we can see here, the last verse in Genesis 50 is actually verse 26. There's no verse 33 in this chapter at all. No prophecy about Joseph Smith. And here's where things start to really unravel for our friend Joseph. You'd expect something as important as a prophecy about a new modern day prophet to be preserved somewhere, right? Like, it's got to be somewhere, but it's not. It's nowhere to be found. This prophecy exists only in Joseph Smith's personal translation, the Joseph Smith translation, or JST, which he himself produced in the 1830s. There is no ancient manuscript or historical support for this prophecy. But to make this problem abundantly clear, let's run Joseph Smith through our little test. There's 4 questions in this test, and they're each designed to test whether or not he's a true prophet. And again, we're going to perform the same exact test on Muhammad in just a couple minutes. Question 1. Did a previous prophet predict your coming? Smith's answer: yes. He claimed that Joseph, the son of Jacob, predicted his arrival and that the prophecy could be found in Genesis 50:33. As we've already seen, this is pretty problematic, but let's go ahead and move on to the next question. Question 2. Can we check this prophecy? Is there a record, some sort of record that we can verify? Smith's answer, unsurprisingly, no. He said the prophecy existed, but that it had been lost. And here's where things really start to fall apart for Joseph. If you open your Bible, even the King James Version, which was the most widely read Bible at that time, and turn to Genesis 50, you won't find verse 33. And you especially won't find a prophecy about Joseph Smith. In fact, if you check other ancient biblical manuscripts, the Masoretic text, the Septuagint, or even the Dead Sea Scrolls, there is no sign of this prophecy anywhere. It's completely absent. But it doesn't just stop there. Like if you check any source, whether it's Jewish, Christian, or even pagan historical records, there is no mention of this prophecy at all. It's not found in the Jewish tradition, in early Christian writings, or any of the pagan historical accounts that often interacted with the biblical text. This verse only shows up in Joseph Smith's own translation, which he produced in the 1830s. It's a verse that exists only because Smith himself added it. This is a ridiculously large red flag. Prophecies like Isaiah's prediction of the Messiah's virgin birth in Isaiah 7:14 or the suffering servant in Isaiah 53 were preserved across centuries, appearing in multiple sources, whether Jewish, Christian, or secular. But Joseph Smith's prophecy, it doesn't appear anywhere outside of his own translation. Joseph Smith's answer to question 2 is extremely alarming. But let's give him the benefit of the doubt and move on to the next question. Question 3. Is there another way that we can confirm this prophecy? Smith's answer, yes. He claimed that God had re-revealed this lost prophecy to him personally. And this isn't necessarily unusual for Smith. He often claims special revelations. For example, in the Book of Mormon, Smith claimed to have received golden plates from an angel, which were then conveniently taken back to heaven, leaving no evidence behind. In this case, Smith said that although the prophecy had been lost, God gave it back to him through divine revelation. This now brings us to our fourth and final question. Question 4. Who told you about this prophecy? Smith's answer, me. Joseph Smith claimed that God re-revealed the prophecy directly to him and no one else. Here's the point, okay? No true prophet would actually answer me to question number 4. It's an absolute watertight, nailed down, ironclad sign of a fake prophet. Anyone who answers me to question number 4 has forever disqualified themselves from being a true prophet. No matter like what else they've ever claimed or said or done. They're fake. They're out. So here's why. Joseph Smith is claiming that God oversaw and approved the following sequence of events. Number 1, God decides that Joseph Smith is the chosen prophet, and to make sure everyone knows this, he has Joseph, the son of Jacob, foretell Smith's arrival thousands of years in advance. The prophecy is then written down in the Jewish scriptures for everyone to see. 2, somehow God's people completely forget about this prophecy. Despite generations of reverence for the scriptures and their prophets, the foretelling of the world-changing Joseph Smith vanishes from memory somehow. No scrolls, no records, nothing remains. Number 3, but God still wants people to believe in Joseph Smith, so he decided to re-reveal this prophecy because it had been lost. But instead of revealing it to historians or scholars or even just other people that could verify it, 4, God re-reveals the prophecy directly to Joseph Smith. God's big plan to verify Joseph Smith as a true prophet of God is to have the very guy the prophecy is about say, hey guys, I mean, I was for sure foretold. I mean, you just got to trust me on this because, I mean, only I know about it because God told me directly, guys. Just trust me, guys. Okay, look, if we believe that God is not a complete moron, we would see that God would not do this. Like, he wouldn't set things up in this way. It completely defeats the purpose of the foretelling in the first place. And then it also makes Joseph Smith indistinguishable from a fake prophet. God would never send a true prophet with the message, guys, I was foretold, but only I know about it. Because a fake prophet could do the exact same thing. This is why Joseph Smith disqualifies himself. He claims a prophecy about him was foretold, but then the only record of this prophecy is his own word. Guys, this is not intelligent. This is extremely dumb. All right, let's now move across the world. Let's go to 7th century Arabia, and this is the time of Muhammad, who would go on to found Islam. Like Joseph, he claimed to be a true prophet, the final messenger sent by God, not just to his own people, but to all of humanity. But Muhammad didn't just stop there. He also claimed that Jesus himself had foretold his coming. Muhammad said that Jesus, the very figure revered by Christians and known by secular historians for hundreds of years, had prophesied his arrival. According to Muhammad, Jesus predicted that a future messenger would come after him and his name would be Ahmad, which is basically just a variant of Muhammad's name. This claim was codified in Surah 61:6 of the Quran, which we'll take a look at in just a second. So let's put Muhammad's claim through the same 4-question test that we used for Joseph Smith. Question 1. Did a previous prophet predict your coming? Muhammad's answer: yes. He claimed that Jesus, the son of Mary, foretold his coming by name. In Surah 61:6 of the Quran, Jesus is quoted as saying, I am truly Allah's messengers to you, confirming the Torah which came before me and giving good news of a messenger after me whose name will be AHMAD. Now, obviously, this is questionable, but let's give him the benefit of the doubt, just like we did Joseph, and move on to the next question. Question number 2. Can we check this prophecy? Is there a record that we can verify? Muhammad's answer: no. I was foretold in these exact words by Jesus. However, all records of these exact words have disappeared. There is no document and no memories of this foretelling. We should actually take a moment and talk about how ridiculous this is from a historical standpoint. Let's start with the New Testament, which was written within 10 to 40 years of Jesus' death by people who either knew him directly or were close to the disciples. These are very, very early sources, much closer to the actual events than the Quran. You would expect something as monumental as a prophecy of a future prophet named Ahmed to at least appear in these very early documents. But as we examine the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, we find nothing. There's no mention of a future prophet by this name or anything remotely like it at all. But that's not all. This period wasn't just limited to the New Testament writings, obviously. There were many people writing about Jesus during that time. We have early apostolic documents and letters from the first Christians, people who knew the apostles or lived within a generation of Jesus. These include the Didache, early 2nd century, a teaching manual attributed to the apostles, the epistles of Clement, late 1st century, written by a prominent Christian leader who also knew Peter. The letters of Ignatius of Antioch, early 2nd century. Ignatius was a student of the apostle John. The epistle of Barnabas, late 1st to early 2nd century, a widely read document in early Christian communities. The Shepherd of Hermas, early 2nd century, a popular Christian work that circulated among early believers. None of these writings at all, many of which were composed within a few decades of Jesus' death, mention anything about a future prophet named Ahmed or any prophecy about resembling what Muhammad claimed. These were some of the earliest Christian documents written at the time when the memories of Jesus' life and teachings were all very fresh on their minds. If Jesus had made such a world-changing prophecy, wouldn't somebody have written it down? Somebody. So let's go even deeper. We check early Jewish historical texts like the Talmud and writings from Josephus, a Jewish historian who documented events from the period. Again, nothing. We also look into pagan records from the Roman Empire, which heavily interacted with both Jews and early Christians. Still, no mention at all of a prophecy about Muhammad or Ahmed. So we ask, if this prophecy was real, why do none of our earliest sources written within even 10 to 40 years after Jesus' death mention it? These are the sources closest to the events, and instead the prophecy only appears in the Quran, written over 600 years after Jesus. This time gap should make us, to put it gently, skeptical. Generally speaking, earlier sources are more reliable than later ones, especially when it comes to historical events. Just like in the case of Joseph Smith, Muhammad's answer to question 2 is extremely alarming. But likewise, let's at least try and give him the benefit of the doubt and move on to our next question. Question 3. Is there any other way to confirm this prophecy? Muhammad's answer: yes. He claimed that God re-revealed the exact words Jesus spoke, and these words were then passed down to him and recorded in the Quran. But the only source for this prophecy is in the Quran itself, a book literally written by Muhammad. We're left in the exact same situation as Joseph Smith. There is no outside verification. This leads us to our last question. Question 4. Who told you about this prophecy? Muhammad's answer: me. And again, just like with Joseph Smith, this makes the prophecy impossible to verify. It's his word against, well, nobody else's. There's no independent confirmation, no other records, just Muhammad's claim that God told him Jesus said it. So here's the parallel between the two cases. Both Joseph Smith and Muhammad claimed that a previous prophet predicted their coming, and both said that all records of this prophecy had been lost. Then both claimed that God conveniently re-revealed this lost prophecy to them and them only. This is a massive red flag for any prophet because it puts their entire claim in a hopelessly circular loop. Guys, I'm a prophet because I say I'm a prophet. Do you see? Are you starting to see the pattern here? In both cases, the prophets set themselves up as the sole source of information that could confirm their prophethood. That's something that no actual prophet of God would ever do. And moreover, God is not a bumbling idiot. Like, he wouldn't try to establish a true prophet in this way. Now, at this point, Muslim apologists might claim that Muhammad's miracles, like the splitting of the moon, prove his prophethood. But here's the problem. Other than the Quran's say-so, none of our non-Muslim sources actually report this incredible event of the moon splitting in half or any of the other Islamic miracles. And then later Islamic sources reporting these miracle accounts only emerge 100 to 250 years after his death as very obvious legends. But more importantly, even if Muhammad did perform miracles, it still wouldn't matter. As Jesus warned in Matthew 24:24, for false Christs and false prophets will arise and perform great signs and wonders so as to lead astray, if possible, even the elect. Miracles alone are not enough to establish a true prophet. God would not validate someone with such a sketchy backstory, like where the prophecy about this person is conveniently lost and then only re-revealed to the prophet himself. I mean, just think about it. Like this whole scenario where a prophet claims to be foretold but can't produce any evidence besides his own word is not the kind of thing that a true prophet would do. And it's certainly not something that God, who is maximally wise and omnipotent and omniscient, would ever oversee or endorse. The idea that God would design a prophecy, let it be completely forgotten, and then re-reveal it to the only person it's about is beyond absurd. Like, I can't get over it. That's why no matter how many miracles or wonders Muhammad is said to have performed, his claim collapses just like Joseph Smith's. Without question, Muhammad is a fake prophet. Oh, and by the way, you'll never catch Jesus Christ doing any of this shady fake prophet stuff because Christianity is actually true.